Welcome to Teens Are Watching, a series brought to you by the Center for Scholars and Storytellers at UCLA. In this series, we will be having teens from all over the country discussing different topics and how they are used and portrayed in the media. This series is meant to uplift the teen voice in conversations directly related to their everyday lives.
Hi, I am Navia Robinson, and I'm very, very excited to be here today. Thank you so much for joining us for the first episode of the Center for Scholars and Storytellers new series, Teens Are Watching. I'm really excited to be the moderator for this wonderful panel of teenagers for our first discussion in this series, which is all about empowering teen voices in conversations around media. Today, we will talk about mental health and how it's portrayed in the media and our teens and their impressions of these portrayals. But before we get started, I would love to introduce our teen panelists. First off, we have Paige Snepp from the West Coast.
Hi, I'm Paige. I'm 18. I'm from Los Angeles, and I have worked with the Center for Scholars and Storytellers for about a year, and in the past, I've worked with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. So, hi.
Hi, I'm super excited to speak with you. Thank you, Paige. And next up, we have Ellie Langdon.
Hi, my name's Ellie. I'm 16 years old. I'm from San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm currently a sophomore in high school. And this is my first time working with the Center for Scholars and Storytellers, but I'm really passionate about mental health, especially how it can be portrayed in the media. So yeah.
Thank you so much. We're very excited to have you, Ellie. And last but not least, we have Lalith Gudi.
Hi everyone, my name is Lalith. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I'm 17 years old and I'm a current junior in high school. I've also recently been part of Center for Storytellers and Scholars, and I think mental health is important and we should focus on it in the media and sports.
Perfect. Well, let's get started with our first question about mental health in the media. The first question is, who do you think does a better job at portraying mental health in the media? Hollywood media or social media creators? Paige, let's start with you.
Okay, so I personally think that in today's time, I think social media does a better job at portraying this because, you have more diversity and also social media is more tailored towards your interests specifically rather than, what showrunners may perceive to be the interests of teens. And also because there's a kind of disconnect you might view in, television and movies, and it's not as relatable, you actually might not be able to, feel as bad or compare yourself to, characters in shows rather than real people on your For You page. So
yeah. That's a great point. Ellie, how about yourself?
That was a great point, Paige. I would say, I think something that's great about social media influencers is that, they're real people. It's not a character on a TV show. So I think that can be used in a really powerful way to kind of raise awareness about mental health. But what I would say about social media influencers is that I think, especially the more famous ones, a big part of their job is to kind of show how their life is perfect or only show the parts of their lives that are good. And I think oftentimes because of that, if social media influencers are experiencing mental health problems, they won't talk about them. But I think that definitely recently, especially in the pandemic, more social media influencers have spoken out about it. And so I think that's really great. I think I agree with what Paige said about kind of how Hollywood portrays it. I think something that's compelling about Hollywood is that you kind of get to see the full experience of a character if they have mental health problems or issues, not just kind of what they want to show you, social media influencers. So yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar. I think that's a great point. I think Hollywood has the resources to portray these stories as accurately as possible, but often they fail to, maybe because they don't have the proper writers who are in touch with teenagers and what they go through. But as you said, because they are fictionalized characters, they don't have to go through the stigmatization of not really wanting to expose all those vulnerable parts of your life. And so that could be what's so helpful about Hollywood. But I think what Hollywood media has to get down is the accuracy of it all and the authenticity of it all. Lalith, what do you think?
I agree with all you guys. I think with Hollywood, we see more of a dynamic change in mental health because usually in TV shows and like movies, there's a smaller time, and we see much bigger changes in characters. Like, they go from being like very depressed or, feeling thoughts of downfalness to like, very positive and happy. But I actually think social media influences are better because a lot of athletes these days, like Ellie touched up on, have mentioned their mental health and how like, being in the bubble for the NBA caused depression and various thoughts, or even, missing out on family because not traveling in various COVID. So I think social media influencers are more relatable, but at the same time, I think they filter stuff too. So end of the day, I think it's like, both ways, pros and cons.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely true. And also there's something nice about like seeing real life people, like you said, NBA players, people that you respect and appreciate, like talk about things that you can relate to. And you don't really have that same relatability with like fiction. Anyway, next up, moving on. How has the media impacted your daily habits, both negatively and positively? Ellie, we'll start with you.
I think positively, I'll just say social media, I think, is a really great way to connect with friends, especially in the pandemic. It's been harder to kind of see people. And so I think that's been great about social media. Mm-hmm. One thing that is negative, I would say, is there's this kind of glow up culture, which is, where influencers are just people on social media kind of like show how they looked before and then show a transformation. And usually the transformation is to become, skinnier and definitely fit into societal beauty standards more. And I think that's kind of harmful because, it can make you think that like that's the end goal and that's what you need to look like in order to, be good or to be perceived as good by other people. Yeah.
Lalith, can I pass it on to you?
Yeah. So I think positively, I think I see a lot more people posting about, various cultures, different issues throughout the world, and that's caused more awareness between teens. And I think that's helping everyone because the word is getting out more. Black Lives Matter or Palestinian protests or just various other issues. And I think negatively, though, like Ellie said, a lot of people are forgetting that you can do things and be successful in different ways. You don't have to follow an influencer or you don't have to follow like a famous 5-star athlete. A lot of NFL people have actually come from 3 stars or even homeless. So I think these days, social media has been trying to get everyone to do something in similar paths, but people are forgetting that you can actually create your own path and, like create your own history.
Yeah, totally. Paige, can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, I just cut out, but I'm back. So,
nice.
So I think going off of what Ellie said, I think glow up culture is a huge issue in both social media and actually like, shows and movies. Because it really depicts like struggling with mental health and other issues as, kind of you'll have this moment where you glow up and you'll kind of overcome these issues and it'll be fixed and everything's fine. But I think the reality for many people struggling with mental illness is, you don't have that snap moment where you glow up, you're beautiful, everything's perfect. It's still management and you're still struggling with it throughout your normal life. And I think kind of focusing more on how to manage these issues rather than waiting for this moment where you're going to change. Sorry, the original question was asking how has it affected my life? I would say with the actually like TikTok and things like more tailored to my taste, instead of like seeking out toxic accounts which might undermine my self-esteem, like on Instagram, I might, automatically be liking things that kind of reinforce better habits. So somehow the algorithm can guess it for me, like on TikTok. So I feel like depending on the app, it can kind of be more beneficial. Yeah.
No, that's, first of all that was very valuable information. But second of all, I think that's totally true. I mean, the algorithms really dictate how your social media experience is. Like, it's kind of out of your hands in a lot of ways. I think what you said about Instagram is kind of very true, where those accounts that can, as you said, undermine your self-esteem are so much like more accessible and than they would be on like, say, TikTok or something like that, that's particularly catered to your interest. So I think personally, social media can affect me negatively in that all those different things that can bring you down and your mental health down are very easy to fall into. And social media platforms are built to where you fall down a rabbit hole of scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And of course, that doesn't necessarily benefit your mental health. And you can make personal decisions to try to go against the grain, but ultimately those things are literally designed to be addictive. And so I think everybody's going to have their moments where social media affects them negatively in that way. So, but it can also be great because we learn so much from it, especially in regards to social justice and things like that. I think it's so prevalent in our generation, particularly because we have social networking stuff. So, and did anybody want to add anything else before we move on to the next question?
I just want to echo what you said. I think like you articulated it perfectly, and I really agree. I think like social media has a lot of power, especially in kind of like things going on in the world, like Black Lives Matter we talked about. And I think it's also a place where you can get educated, which is good. But I think you also have to be careful about what information from social media you kind of take to be true, because since so many people are putting information out there, not all of it is factual.
Very, very true. And what about like TVs and movies too, in regards to how TV and film can affect you negatively and positively? Are there any particular shows that have done, have had negative influence or positive influence that you guys can think of? I'm like trying to think myself. Like, I think often I watch shows that are meant to portray teenagers, and ultimately they are like 32-year-olds. And I'm like, how is this supposed to help us? Like, especially if I was younger, if I wasn't 16 watching this stuff and I was like 11 or 12, more impressionable, watching these 28-year-olds play 16-year-olds and assuming that's how I was supposed to look when I'm 16. I mean, that's dangerous. It can definitely be dangerous for your self-esteem. Have you guys had that same experience ever?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to bring that up. I mean, I think for shows that try to, create empathy with these characters and kind of, make it feel relatable to the high school experience and address high school mental health issues, having that age gap between the actor and the character is a huge issue because, I mean, subconsciously, I'm always thinking like the actor, this person is an adult, and the problems they face are so fundamentally different from the ones I'm facing now. As a high schooler, as a young person, I'm living at home. It's completely different, and it registers in my mind without me really even, thinking about it. And does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
So
you can go ahead, Lalith.
Oh, okay. So I think a show that has pretty big influence on me was actually All American. Because the first time I watched it, I've actually thought like Jordan, Simone, everyone else, I thought they were like 16, 17.
Yeah.
But then I did a quick Google search and I found that they were like late 20s and, early 30s.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that, but I just think like the problems they face, like, because they're like settled in life and, they're kind of like going up against us, where we're trying to get into college, we're trying to like make a future living, we're trying to help our parents. And I just think that like, even though the problems are relatable, like being an athlete, you got to keep grades up, you got to help your family succeed, and you got to succeed. I just think that like having a more younger perspective would actually open the characteristic out more, I think.
Definitely. Yeah, that's true. And then also I think there's a layer to like employing people that are that age to play teenagers where they can like get away with things that aren't appropriate to show teenagers doing on screen, but there's a little bit of a suspicious element to that. It's like, maybe we can just show teenagers' lives as they are without having to feel like you have to, play them up to a certain degree. That's kind of, not okay. I think you guys know what I mean. Yeah. So let's move on to our final question for this Q&A portion. In recent research conducted by the Center for Scholars and Storytellers, they found that teens who watched the third season of 13 Reasons Why reported increased conversations with their peers and parents about mental health afterward, and they looked up information on mental health issues because of what they watched. Paige or Ellie, Lalith, anyone? How have you ever watched something that dealt with mental health and got curious about it afterward? And if so, what did you guys do? Lalith, we can start with you.
I think I'll go back to All American actually.
Yeah.
When I watch this show, it actually relates to me a lot because I play sports as well. But I'm also like I have a lot of things on my shoulder, whether it's grades or like AP tests or college applications. So in the show, they show like the athlete going to like a mental health counselor, and so what I did for myself was I didn't obviously go to a mental health counselor, but I was looking at various tips from different blog people, who've had like the same pathway as me, except they're a couple years older. Because I think that's more relatable when someone's gone through the same path as you, but they're, just like 2-3 years older.
Yeah.
And so I think like reading blogs or different newspapers with similar pathways would go a long way.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah. So one show that I watched is called Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And basically in the show, it's like a comedy, and they use also like songs to kind of like talk about what's going on in the plot. But in the show, the main character goes kind of like what Lalith said, goes and gets help, like mental health help. And I think just seeing a character on a TV show go and search for that and then have like a positive outcome from looking for that mental health, it kind of it made me feel less scared to reach out for help in a situation where I would need it. And I think it kind of like destigmatized therapy and also just like any kind of mental health help for me, which was really amazing.
Yeah. Paige?
Yeah, I was actually going to say, like, I've watched 13 Reasons Why, and it actually, like, although it may have increased conversations about mental health, there were certain scenes that, kind of had a negative impact on me. For instance, one of the plot points of the show is that this guy tries to console this girl that he likes, and she kills herself and records a tape saying like it was part of the reason she killed herself was because he left when she told him to leave the room, and that she kind of blamed him for leaving and respecting her boundaries. And that scene in particular really negatively impacted me because it left me thinking like, how can I properly console my friends? Like, how do I know to balance, their boundaries and knowing when to step in and really support them? And I didn't really, that dynamic really never registered with me until I had to actually do it myself later on, like with my friends who are struggling. And I think that there could be a lot more showing, how to properly support your friends, and also just like maybe not in an environment where in media you're showing like negative outcomes from respecting boundaries and, just better portrayals of support in general.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what's so interesting is I feel like shows and films standing alone could be great resources for learning about mental health, but I think so far most of us, or at least myself, have had the experience where, for example, like kind of piggybacking off of what you said about 13 Reasons Why, when you see something and it has more of a negative influence, and then you feel the need to like displace that, what you just saw, and try to understand it by like going and looking up some other resource or doing research that way. Like there are some films that I love. There's a movie called Girl Interrupted that I really like, and it is about girls in a mental institution. But I watched it and I loved the movie because I love the actors, but I was like, I don't know how entirely accurate that is. And I felt like I've had more experiences like that in like Hollywood media where I'm like, is that really, like, are they accurately portraying these people? I'm not quite sure. And that's really what's inspired me to like do my own research. And I hope that kind of changes and that we can look at like films and shows and see them represent people and their struggles authentically. So, yeah. Anything else that you guys want to add to this particular thing? If not, we have other questions to get to. So, anything? Okay. Great. Well, thank you guys so much for your insightful thoughts. We are always looking for questions from our audience. So if you would like to submit some in the future to anybody who's watching this, check the description below, and please subscribe to the Center for Scholars and Storytellers YouTube. Follow them on Instagram and like them on Facebook. Great. So, what do you guys think about how mental health is portrayed in the media? Do you think that their work is benefiting teens, or is there still room to grow?
Yeah, you want to go, Paige?
Go ahead. Go.
Okay. What I was gonna say is, at least in the shows I've been watching, and this might just be what I'm watching, but I think I've definitely seen like movement in a positive direction. I know, I just think like one example of a show is Big Mouth, which is like a comedy animation about like a bunch of middle schoolers. But I just think, I think there's definitely been work, and I think in Hollywood, people are really trying to kind of portray mental health more accurately. And like I've definitely seen that, but I still think there's a lot of work to be done, because I think sometimes mental health issues can be kind of like the accuracy of their portrayal can kind of be pushed aside or not focused as much, and kind of the drama or like the excitement of the show can be prioritized. And I think like it's really important, obviously, if you want to make a show exciting to watch, but also to make sure you're portraying any mental health issues, make sure you do it in an accurate way.
Yeah, and also like not just like in a one-noted way, because I think so often we see mental health portrayed in either like a very minute, small form of what it is, and not the bigger picture, or like even how intense mental health struggles can be. I guess media in general, particularly like television, needs to get more comfortable with getting more in depth what mental health can mean, and like how diverse that experience can be depending on the particular person or the particular community that they're from or a part of, because that really changes your experience. I know being Black, it's very, 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 like I truly, All American, I think, is one of the only times that I've seen a Black person or young person go through mental health struggles, and it kind of be portrayed in a respectful way and not in a comedic way, or not in a way that disregards, them being actual humans. So I think that's important, and I look forward to seeing that. Hopefully we'll see that soon. So what do you guys think about how mental health is portrayed in the media, and do you think their work is benefiting teens? Is there still room to grow? Do you want to answer, Paige? Sorry.
Yeah. So I think that right now there are a lot of issues in even, show creators with good intentions. And just one of the issues is weighing entertainment value versus, true depictions that might help those in need. And, one of the whole issue of mental health struggles, it's taboo, it's compelling, and it's interesting, and it creates conflict. And those are the foundations of a story, and it can be used to propel a story forward. But the issue is not, you have to use mental health not so much as a tool for the story, but you also should address, the actual full experiences of the characters, and not just how they relate to a plot. And another issue that I think should be talked about is, not just like, demonization of people with mental illness, which, has been a trend, I think, throughout entertainment history, but also romanticization of mental health issues. I think 13 Reasons Why suffers from this, and a lot of other shows is kind of showing it to be like, I'm quirky, I'm different because I have a mental illness. And it's not, I don't think that's really how people with mental illness feel. And and it makes it kind of more difficult to have a real conversation around the difficulties of life with mental illness.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Lalith, how about you?
I actually feel that a couple different media channels are doing pretty good. I know ESPN is owned by Disney, and obviously Disney runs a lot of kid shows and different movies. But I think that they're doing a better job on ESPN, which is more of a sports platform than their normal one. And this is because, like, Paul George from the Los Angeles Clippers, he actually suffered depression in the bubble a couple months ago, and you would think that everyone would actually be supporting him, but more people were actually against him instead of supporting him because he's making big bucks, but he wasn't like scoring 20 to 30 points per game. And I think ESPN really made an effort to tell athletes and also just kids who have a lot of things on their shoulders that like whatever the focus is, without like proper mental health, you're not going to be the person who you want to be. And I think this was very important because they set up hotlines with NBA, NFL, various kids organizations. And I think it's just important, no matter like whether it's a TV show for a 20-year-old or a TV show for a 50-year-old, you never know what a person is going through. And just any small 1-minute segment or 30-minute segments of how's your day, what's happening, can we check up on you? I think that's going to help in the long run.
Yeah, so another question, like what would you guys recommend to a TV show or movie creator on like how to actually capture the teen experience and addressing teen mental health issues? What would you guys recommend?
It's a great question. I mean, I think interestingly enough, a lot of like showrunners and writers, they have kids or they have nieces or they have people who they could totally talk to who are teenagers. And I think that connection is really important. And even though it's a stigmatized conversation, the only way that we're going to reverse that is by talking about it. And so I would just ask these people, like even, personally working on like a show is interesting because you are working with some people so much older than you, but you kind of do have to like step your foot in their door and be like, hey, like I'm always here if you want to ask me about the specific thing that I would know about being this age. I think a big thing, particularly with like child's programming, is that often it kind of primes people to disregard of mental health and its importance because a lot of it is just like super positive, like overly positive to the point where you almost grow up looking at these shows thinking that nobody feels sadness and that maybe if you do, you're isolated for that. And so I think children's programming has a responsibility to show what sadness can look like, even if it's a simple, not necessarily like mental illness, but sadness, a smaller degree of that kids can understand and process and feel like they have some source to relate to. And I think that would do a great deal in like destigmatizing the conversation. But I just rambled, so I'm gonna move on to anybody who'd like to answer that question. Paige, maybe? Or Ellie?
Yeah, Ellie, do you have anything?
Yeah, I think one thing, and this kind of ties into how we were talking about earlier, how often the teenagers on these shows are actually played by like almost 30-year-olds. I think, first of all, talking to more teenagers, when you're in the process of writing a show. But I also think oftentimes, like with these older people portraying these roles, it can kind of get glamorized or like kind of portrayed in a different way than it actually is. And so I think also having teens portray like actual teenagers would definitely help capture the experience accurately, because I also think the way in which we view adults going through mental health difficulties, even if it's an adult playing a teenager, is very different than an actual teenager playing a teenager. And I just think we almost get desensitized to watching it on TV. So I think that's just something that like screenwriters and people who work in the industry should think about.
Yeah. And granted, like all those screenwriters, and they've all been teens before, that's true. But nobody has been like, had the same teenage experience as people who are teenagers now have. I mean, like how different that my experience as being a teenager is to my parents or even some of my older brothers is crazy. I mean, particularly with social media and streaming and new forms of media that really can affect your mental health more than it has ever been seen before. And so I think, the teenagers of today are important and making sure that those representations are accurate. Lalith, do you want to add anything?
I actually think that the recommendation to screenwriters and content creators should be like increasing awareness is one thing, but we need like better awareness. And I think like on cereal boxes and a lot of food boxes, there's like QR codes that usually scan and say, participate in this survey for free food. And I think that would actually be really like vital for content creators, because after a serious episode, let's say it's very emotional and emotionally draining, and I think if they just put a small QR code and ask a couple of questions, and kids like us who are watching the show answer it, they can improve that feedback with their show. And I think like if after a couple episodes they get one kid in like immediate interaction with the actors, it would help both sides, because then the kids would know that they're valuing their opinion, and it would also show like we're increasing awareness, but we're truly trying to help you guys succeed in our shows. And I just think that there needs to be like better interaction, because awareness is already there. It's like you guys said, it's evident in a lot of TV shows and movies, but I just think the way it's portrayed isn't there yet.
Definitely. And I think when it comes to showrunners or people who produce movies or whatever, it's really accessible to kind of keep your finger on the pulse. And whether it's a step on Twitter, even if you might not like it, I think you can really find access, literally direct resources to what teenagers are feeling right now and kind of look inside of their head. If you do want to do that indirectly, it's possible. Being engaged in pop culture and kind of, I know it moves quickly these days, but I think that is essential if you do want to represent it accurately on screen. So, yeah.
Just could I add, like, just talking about the kind of beautification of mental illness. We talk a lot about destigmatization, but I think it's really more about humanizing mental illness. And we really shouldn't shy away from showing the really ugly parts of having, a mental illness, because, if you really smooth out the experience, it's going to be more difficult for people suffering to actually relate to characters and feel, therapy is beneath me. These people don't really get what it's like to have these problems, that they're not actually going through what I'm going through. So that's why therapy works for them. But seeing like more extreme pain or more extreme experiences and seeing those people reach out for help and kind of seeing more resolution for, the uglier side of mental illness could actually, bring more, connection between people actually struggling and, the media they consume. And also you mentioned just like mental health disparities. I think that that's also a thing that really needs to be talked about more, because I know I'm Asian American, like from ages 15 to 24, suicide is the most common cause of death. And that's like the demographic for these shows. For Black people, Black women in particular aren't really diagnosed as often with mental health disorders. And so raising awareness and destigmatizing, even the cultural bounds of, what is acceptable to talk about is, I think, really important. Sorry, rambling.
No, that's so incredibly true. And then just like people who are behind making these shows and movies, recognizing that every single demographic needs to see their own experience represented in regards to mental health. Particularly, I will speak a lot about the Black experience because that's what I'm used to. I think it's stigmatized for a lot of reasons, just culturally, but also because so much of the media that's made to skew to that community, to our community, it never talks about that stuff, and if they did, I think it would certainly help people come to terms with it and approach it as a real thing. And I think you're so right, Paige, when you talk about it is less about destigmatization. I think we've destigmatized moderate, like talking about moderate mental health issues, but not really the other, any other point on the spectrum of mental health. So yeah, that's totally true. And then I also would love to see in TV shows or movies how mental health can be hurtful generationally, like if that makes any sense, and how mental health issues or struggles can pass down from the parent to the kid. And like, it really isn't something that's just exclusive to our generation. I know we talk about that particularly because that's the generation that we're from, but I think a lot of the source of that can be the generation before us and the people who have brought us up have also struggled with these things. I know our generation is so often considered sensitive, but I think everybody's sensitive. I think everybody's experienced these things, and acting as if like we are the only people. We just happen to be this overtly sensitive generation, and we're just dealing with all this is crazy, because I think a lot of our tendencies and approach to how we feel about mental health comes from the people who brought us up. I rambled.
Yeah. No. Does anyone else? I have a comment, but I think if anyone else has a comment, they should go first.
Yeah, I'll go, I guess. So I think what Paige said is really true. Like, you need to see the ugly more than you need to see the good. Like, as someone who's interested in pre-med, whether I'm performing surgeries in the future or helping people, I'm gonna have to see like dead bodies, and that may not be the most comfortable thing, but it's only gonna make me or the future doctor like a better doctor. And I think the same thing works in a restaurant, right? If you're like a chef or a waiter and there's like unhealthy practices occurring or happening, like you're gonna have to like change that, because someday you're gonna be eating the food, and like you want your food to be clean, so you gotta serve other people the same way. And I think like everywhere else except in the media and mental health specific, it's just not portrayed that way, because you don't see more bad than you see good. And I brought this up before, but like I understand that movies and TV shows can only go for so long, but you really have to focus on from point A to B. You can't just say one day I'm feeling sad and down, and next day a miracle happens and I come out of it, because that's just not the case for everyone, which Paige touched up on. And I think that needs to be showcased more than just from succeeding to failing or vice versa.
Yeah, totally. Like not treating mental health as if it's like, this is a little plot twist, and now we're going to disregard of this when we've thought of something else for our storyline. You were going to say something, Paige, right? Okay.
Yeah, just to your point about, generational trauma and how that manifests in younger generations, I think that goes to kind of what I kind of mentioned earlier, which is better depends on support systems as well, because although the target demographic may be teens for these shows, you can also give teens the tools to, better confront maybe their more conservative parents and talking about mental health. And so often, I know with like immigrant households, I myself am a second generation Chinese. So there's a lot of, thoughts about stoicism around mental health with many minority communities. It's kind of like so much to their child. So you're expected to kind of, tough through it, keep going, be successful. But what you said about generational trauma, it really needs to be fostered with these parents who also think that they had a very hard life and thus these issues aren't really relevant, but they are. They're very important.
Yeah, no, it's interesting what you said about that. My Mima is Asian American. She's Asian and Sicilian, but either way, she has talked to me about that experience, and just have, I hope you don't mind me talking about it a little bit, but just like the pressure of being a model minority, especially when she was a teenager. Like that was already, her status of living in America was she faced so much discrimination as people of color still do nowadays. But the expectations of her were, unbelievable, as she put it. And I don't think that you see that in media, or definitely not in film and TV very much. Yeah. Anyway, so as we're wrapping up, I wanted to ask you guys if you had any closing thoughts about this topic in the media. Paige, Ellie, Lalith, anybody?
I think something that I didn't mention is also just like in also portraying the uglier sides and more difficult sides of mental health, also keeping in mind like for the viewers that might actually be struggling with these issues, not triggering them or, triggering their trauma. Because I feel like in a lot of, I don't know, in the shows I've watched on some occasions, they use it for shock value or like to really emotionally wrench at the viewer. And also like if your target audience is, people you want to help, and people you want to positively benefit from this experience, you have to keep in mind their needs and stay sensitive to their situations as well.
I'm really glad you said that because, yeah, that's incredibly important. And for anybody listening and who goes through the things that we're talking about, I hope that we've talked about all of this with sensitivity and sympathy in mind. Yeah. Ellie?
I kind of want to echo that. I agree with what Paige just said. And, if you're gonna portray a mental health issue or a mental illness on a TV show, don't kind of put in like a little bit of effort and then kind of stop there. Because I've seen on shows before, like characters have been given mental illnesses and then like just the plot line has been completely abandoned later on. And I think just, make sure that if you're going to write a mental illness into the story, make sure you're going to do a good job of it. And it's not just kind of like what Paige said for shock value.
Yeah. And like mental health issues aren't so extremely rare to where I'm sure in the setting of a writer's room, you have somebody who can speak to that from experience. And I know like from personal experience that sometimes people, producers or people who run shows can have trouble giving up some of their personal kind of investment in their script or this to give it up to somebody who really understands that perspective. But I think you have to trust those people. If they're younger than you, if they're a newer writer or a staff member, you've got to trust them to write their own story. And that's the only way that you're going to really be able to have media that other people can identify with. Lalith, how about you?
I just think at the end of the day, I think the media is getting better, and I think like TV shows and movies are getting better in terms of awareness. But again, I just don't think the quality of interaction is there because they're not really hearing from teens or teens who have passed away and forming stories on their experiences. It's still kind of like, I think just because I have a degree in this or, I've done this for a long time, I think I can still get to the kids. And I think overall, we just need more interaction between like actual events that have occurred, kids who are actually going through the situations, and I think that'll help everyone.
Yeah, and overall, if you aren't going to portray mental health correctly, it's best not to do it at all, and just take your time. I guess I'm speaking directly to the people like writers or people who are behind media and film and television that. This stuff requires time and a lot of patience to get accurate, and that it's so incredibly worth it at the end of the day. Last but not least, a recurring segment for this series is asking our panelists what they are watching right now. So everyone, what are you guys watching?
I am currently watching, binging The Handmaid's Tale, last season, what's coming out. Very invested in that. Yeah.
Yeah. What am I watching right now? I'm watching, yikes. I'm watching Peaky Blinders, which like, wow, that couldn't have any, like, that is the most far from what we're talking about type of series ever. But
British gangs.
Yeah, British gangs, like definitely not related. Well, I will say there is a character that struggles with mental health, and it's interesting seeing because the character is called Arthur. It's interesting seeing his experience in the time period of like the 1920s and 30s, and that was certainly not discussed at all. You were just considered crazy or not crazy, and yeah, shout out to Peaky Blinders, I guess. Ellie, how about you?
I've been watching. I know like it's not coming out right now. It's kind of, but it was coming out pretty recently. Is Schitt's Creek. It's a really good one that I enjoy.
Oh yeah, I finished watching that like in March. I was going through just a phase where I was like, I can't do anything except watch TV right now, and that was one of the things that I watched, and it was really uplifting. Yeah, Lalith.
Yeah, I've been watching All American. I think it's a good show, and I'm actually rewatching Designated Survivor for the second time. Because I think that portrays various issues across the world.
Yeah. I would also, have you guys ever seen Master of None? Master of None? Okay. Well, if you've never seen it, I'd recommend watching it. It's a really great show. I think the episodes are like 20 to like 30 minutes. So they're short, but they like feel so much longer. Great show. Anyway, great cast. Well, thank you so much to Paige, Ellie, and Lalith for joining us and joining me today to talk about this really important topic. This is just the first episode in an ongoing series, so please click the link in the bio to submit questions and topics. Subscribe to the Center of Scholars and Storytellers channel. Follow Center of Scholars and Storytellers on Instagram, and like the Center of Scholars and Storytellers on Facebook. For the Center of Scholars and Storytellers, I am Navia Robinson, and thank you so much.